Yeah, so welcome to the audio podcasting masterclass, week one, script writing and pre-production. And once again, my name is Tom Sternad. I'm the lead digital artist of the Creator Space. And we're going to take you through this journey of creating an audio podcast from a script all the way through to a finished project and finalized, mixed, mastered, ready to share and publish and everything. So we'll go through this. So it's an audio podcast, which is essentially it will record sound, use sound and mix sound and create a story through this process. So it's going to be a really exciting project to work on, and I hope that you can share emails with me, and you can email Tom at tbmcs.ca, and we'll go from there. So just in terms of what we're doing, story, script writing, pre-production process, that's this week's session. And then overall, we're going to do, week one is that, story, script, sound recording. Week two, we're going to get into podcast recording. And week three, podcast sound editing and design. Week four, we're going to do the podcast final mix and mastering. So that's really, the finishing touches there. And so it's going to be a really neat process in terms of, being able to get together and virtually and make this happen. So here's our overall goal. We're going to write, record, and complete a final mix of a short 1 to 2 minute story-based fictional audio podcast. So that's the idea here, is that we're writing a fictional story. So it's kind of like a radio play. There's been a lot of work with theater too, where theater companies are working on taking plays or adapting things and making them into audio podcasts. So that kind of idea, I think, is really timely and effective. So we want to look at that kind of goal. How do we record, mix, and create a 1 to 2 minute story-based fictional audio podcast? So that's going to be our goal. And we did this last January, February 2020, and we had an in-person workshop, 4 weeks, and we were able to get together, have different students record different parts. And I wanted to share one of those with us that was achieved and created. So I'm just going to go here to full screen and switch over, and let me play this, and we'll give it a listen, and then we can talk about it after.
A fierce wind was howling on that blustery, cold, dark winter's night. The garden gate slamming back and forth on loose hinges, she makes her way across the garden, moving across the crisp, packed snow toward the front door. She stops and pushes the door open. Her breathing is heavy as she enters the cottage, walking slowly across a wooden floor. In the distance, she hears the sound of a piano playing, Eric Satie's Nocien No. 1. She makes her way down a narrow hallway to a large living room. A man sits at the piano and turns to see her.
You came.
Nocien No. 1.
He smiles and continues to play. She watches him, barely able to breathe. As the music ends, he turns and stands towards her. He hasn't aged and remains as handsome as the day they met all those years ago.
Ava.
He smiles and walks toward her. He's still so handsome, though his hair is flecked with grey, and she wonders if he notices how the passage of time has changed her form, her skin, her soul.
Please don't.
She steps back, fearful of his closeness, and he stops. They stare at each other, not knowing what to do next. She shivers as he reaches out his hand. Tentatively, she takes it, and he guides her toward the hearth and sits her down on an old sagging armchair by the fire and kneels at her feet. Shadows dance across his rugged jawline, and his deep blue eyes glisten with the light of the flickering flames.
So beautiful. How I have missed your face.
I can't stay long.
She reaches into her handbag and takes out a small diary wrapped in parchment and gives it to him. He doesn't take his eyes off her as he takes the small parcel from her. His eyes filled with tears. He knows what it took for her to get this to him.
Ava, I know.
Please, Thomas, don't say anything.
Will you stay a while?
I should go. It isn't safe for me to be here.
Something in the way she spoke, the way she looked at him, made him flinch. Searching her expression for more, he takes her hand and kisses her palm.
Ava, come with me now. Let us go together. Don't go back. We can start again, somewhere new, where no one will know who we are. I've a place in the Cullen, on the Isle of Skye. It is remote and safe for us. Please, Ava, tell me you will come.
As he spoke, there was a gunshot in the distance. They froze momentarily, and then without hesitation they leapt to their feet and ran toward a small dark room. He pulled the carpet back off the floor and opened the trap door.
Get down there, Ava, quickly.
Without question, she did as he asked, and he followed her, pulling the carpet back over the opening in the floor, and then slammed the trapdoor shut.
Nic tiesa.
Perfect. So yeah, that was fantastic. I just wanted to let that all play out. So it's yeah, it's really interesting to see that you know what you can do when you like hear the you know, hear all the sound instead of actually you know, having to see anything. And I always like to say, you know, there's so many, you know, the different layers of sound in that, you know, works quite nicely. But also, if you think about everything you're hearing, it's layers and layers. And that's what we're going to look at is this, there's the script writing, but also thinking about the layers of what's needed to tell your story effectively. And I always like to equate the fact that, you know, if you think about, you know, a film that you wanted to make, or you know, telling something visually could be very expensive, but with sound you can record, you can get sound effects, and you can do things at a fraction of the cost. So I always say, you know, they spend 300 million making Lion King. You could probably make Lion King for $300 as in sound only, with your time to do all the sound design. But you know, just think about what's possible, and that's I always like that idea of that. It could be a lot more cost effective to create something with sound, and we hear it and you imagine it, and everybody will get a different idea of what they think the story is once you know, different visuals. So we all probably saw different things in listening to that, and I actually felt a bit cold and chilly just from the wind blowing the whole time. So it's really interesting what it can do to you, even though I'm not seeing anything. In my mind, it creates a whole visual. And the mind is a lot more powerful than what can be done just visually. So our imaginations, you know, are you know, $1 trillion budgets of what's possible in our imagination versus just visually. So that's, I think, really interesting, the power of the storytelling through a podcast, and that's what we want to try and capture. And you know, there's really no restrictions here. Usually when we talk about something else with like video production or anything, there's restrictions in what can you do, what can you achieve. You know, you can't have 20 explosions, but with an audio podcast like that we're doing in this workshop, you can have 20 explosions. There's no limit to that. It's just a sound effect that you can get for free or at a very low cost. So that's really the cool part of it. Okay, so let's just continue on here. So yeah, so again, we're doing 1 to 2 minute story-based fictional audio podcast. And you know, so what does that mean? So we heard that. I wanted to play that because I think that's a really good sample of what's possible and how it can work. So narrative podcasts are story-driven audio recordings, and as opposed to more traditional interview style ones. So we're looking at, you know, just putting together, you know, a radio play, and that's really the idea. So think of it like a movie soundtrack without seeing the picture, and that's what we're looking to achieve. Now you can apply this. The reason we're doing this is because this will give you an idea and creative concepts of how to achieve these layers of sound design. And the same concepts can be applied to documentary podcasts. So if you think about, if you listen to like a CBC documentary, audio documentary, and it's something that there's an interview and it's let's say somewhere by the water about fishing, then the tendency is for that documentary show or that podcast to capture that essence. So you'll hear sounds of the ocean, sounds of fishing, sounds of what's happening, crowds, if there's crowds involved, and so on. So you can apply these same ideas that you do in this kind of narrative podcast to interviews, documentaries, anything. So it's kind of an idea of, if you start to think about sound design in an audio podcast, no matter what the genre or format is, you can really elevate what you're able to produce beyond just talking people in an interview setting, for example, right? So that's the really cool part. So this is kind of a summary. Why a narrative audio podcast? Because you can apply it to everything. If you can learn to write, narrate, and record multiple people, it's the same idea than if you're going out to do interviews for a documentary podcast, music and concert podcasts, and so on. So, this is kind of I find a great way to learn about all these concepts and techniques, even if it's not your cup of tea, it's something that you don't necessarily want to do again. I challenge you to try going through this process and project, and you'll just learn more about what's involved in sound production, sound creation, sound design. And I think that can be applied also to films, your sound design. It could be applied to sound design, can be used in a background of a gallery. Let's say you're presenting paintings that you created. You can have this kind of a sound design in the background of your gallery exhibit playing, and that can bring people there. Okay, so here's kind of the team traditionally. This might be entirely you, and here's kind of the idea of how it usually is. So director, writer, narrator, I'm saying you. Crew, sound engineer, probably will be you. Sound editor, mixer, sound mastering. So this would be kind of a breakdown if you had a crew working with you. Cast, a couple leads, let's say, actors. So it could be, other students or just, people or yourself as well, right? So that's kind of the idea there of what's required to make, and it's quite small if you think about, again, something like a Lion King is probably, there's, 30,000 people working on it. And, if you think about, you can probably do something for 12 people working on that to achieve that kind of same storytelling and sound design process. Okay, so screenwriting. What is script writing? The art and craft of writing a screenplay for media. So they can be original, they can be adapted, and as we just saw with like Oscars, there's the original screenplays, adapted screenplays, and traditionally we're using movement, actions, expression, and dialogue of the characters. So now we're going to take that screenwriting idea, and for podcasts, we're going to change it up. We're going to add sound. Instead of the movement, we don't care if someone walks left to right unless it's really important for the sound to hear that, but we more care about that we hear their footsteps coming towards us. That's kind of that important action note. So now we need audio actions. That's going to be the big difference when we're writing for an audio podcast. So you can only hear the sounds in a podcast. There's no visual element. So that's really important to work that way. So every sound needs to be described in the script. So usually scripts won't have that much when it comes to sound notes. There might be a little bit, like there's this song plays, there's this sound effect, we hear a doorbell ring in the background, stuff like that might happen. So that's always important, that we're going to really be describing what we hear. So a narrator is also something that's very regular in this type of an audio podcast. Someone like we heard in that sample from the previous workshop, a narrator taking us through the journey. And that narrator takes us through the story, introduces us to people, gives us any kind of information that we need that we just can't see visually. So the narrator can be our guide in this audio podcast. And not all films will have a narrator, But a lot of audio podcasts will generally have some sort of a narrator to guide us through what's happening and bring in characters then. And that could also be the producer of it. So like a CBC type of documentary recording would have someone telling us, okay, we're here in Newfoundland, we're here, this is what's happening, and setting up the stage, and then we talk to this person, and they work at this place, and so on. And that's the idea. So with a narrator or someone speaking guide, if you will, for the podcast. Then we have sound design and effects. So notes. What do people hear? Are they going to hear, a loon in the evening with water lapping on the shores? You can already visualize what that would look like. And dialogue. Then the different characters. That's still very standard in the audio podcast. It's like it would be in a script. So that's the whole kind of idea. So just some parameters, and it's, you can always break this, but here's an idea just so for success and just to challenge yourselves too. Try to tell a fictional story that takes place in 2 to 3 different locations with 1 to 2 actors that is 1 to 2 minutes in length. So, if you want to voice it yourself, that's fine. You can be the actor, and I'm not saying that, this way you don't have to have a second person, but if you can get one more person, that's great. It can, again, add to your challenge and experience level here. And then the 2 to 3 different locations. Now, it could just be one location if it's really, that's all that your story's about. Like the sample we heard was really just one location. But, if you try to look at doing a couple locations, it helps because then we'll have sound design that we'll need to create in each location. And that's always fun, is to try to figure out what does it sound like to be outside in the forest in the snow versus inside a house in the middle of the forest in the winter in the snow. 2 different sounds. You'll hear more of all the exterior sounds as you're outside in the forest. You're going to hear less of it as you're in a house. So those are still 2 different locations. Or there's a winter in a forest and then there's a summer on the seaside in Greece. And that's kind of the 2 locations where we're going to have to create 2 different sound design sets. And that's great just to give you that experience of creating these things. And then 1 to 2 minutes in length. So we're talking about 1 to 2 pages, nothing too long, just so we can be successful in creating this and recording this and finishing it within our 4 weeks. We don't want to add too much extra work, but we just want this to be a fun, creative exercise of exploring what kind of story you can do and taking the process of recording it, adding the sound effects, doing some editing, and doing the mix, which is the real fun part of, as you heard, the final piece, mixing it all together. That's really fun. Okay, so moving on. So elements of a story, a little quote here, Robert McKee, and here's the whole thing, is like, a beautifully told story is a symphonic unity in which structure, setting, character, genre, and idea meld seamlessly. To find their harmony, the writer must study the elements of stories if they were instruments of an orchestra, first separately, then in concert. So that's kind of that idea of, structure, setting, character, genre. And once you can answer these questions, these are kind of those questions, and I think this applies to almost all the types of digital art and projects we're creating through the creator space in our workshops, that, if you're exploring these things, that's the whole idea, is that you're going to be looking at these different types of, whether you're doing a digital illustration, what is the structure, the setting of that, what are the characters, and what's that whole idea behind it? And those are questions you'll ask yourself in any art form, really. And I think that's the cool thing of that it still happens here when we're doing a script. There's a lot of overlap. 3-act story structure. I think this is a great way to look at it. There's Act 1, establishing, Act 2, build, Act 3, resolve. There's like a climax. So inciting incident, someone arrives, like we heard that sample, someone arrives in this house, and we establish where we are, what's happening, winter, snow, wind, so on. Plot point 1, the 2 people know each other. The man came back to talk to her. Midpoint, rising action. There's a gunshots heard. They run to hide, and more discussions. And the climax, the soldiers storm the house and say they can't find anybody. Resolution. The music plays. Maybe they've escaped their hiding and everything's fine. So that it's kind of resolved, not totally resolved, but that's the idea. Very simple. 1, 2, 3, and this doesn't have to be 100 pages or 100 minutes. This kind of a structure can happen in 1 minute. So that's kind of the whole thing. That beginning, middle, end storyline can happen in a 30-second piece. It can happen in a 30-minute piece, and I think that's important to take away and remember that we can do that quite quickly and efficiently and effectively as we go to work on this. Okay, so genre. This is great because if you choose a specific genre, then there's already some expectation. So it allows you to do a lot in a couple minutes versus spending a lot of time establishing things if you already use a predetermined genre. Here's some genre samples. There's probably a million more, but horror, western, war. That was kind of a historical war type podcast story, coming of age, crime, action, adventure, science fiction, mockumentary. Maybe you want to do a mockumentary type audio podcast where you're telling a story, but it's as if it were a documentary, but done as a fictionally scripted piece, right? So taking the genre and playing with it is great. Character, someone has choices. The greater the pressure, the deeper the revelation. But understanding what the characters are, even though it's just a quick podcast exercise, think about who the characters are and how they're going to speak. Because then you'll find that the dialogue comes out quite naturally if you understand who the characters are. Who are these people? Do you know these types of people in your own lives? Is it modeled on somebody? That can really help create the characters that you're going to write about. And that's a really neat thing to look at. Characterization, what are they going to be? And that could be something that the narrator, so these kinds of points we can't see, but this might be something that needs to be written in the narration to say, so-and-so graduated from this school and they're in their 70s and they used to work as an auto mechanic and so on and so forth. So, think about that where these characterizations might be something that the narrator needs to help tell the audience of, to help us get a deeper understanding of who the characters are as they speak. And again, we're doing something really short, so that narrator can quickly and effectively give us a lot of this information without making it hard for us to figure out who the characters are. So the more info we can get through a narration, the more easy it is to comprehend and get absorbed into the story as it unfolds. So that's a really nice way to think about it. Okay, what is your story's meaning, the theme? Really important there too. So what is this story going to be about? And then you get into this controlling idea expressed in a single sentence describing how and why life undergoes change from one condition of existence at the beginning to another at the end. So some samples: an unjust, negative world returns to justice. Happiness fills our lives when we learn to love unconditionally. So these kind of controlling ideas, that kind of main theme. And that the whole thing, love has no bounds in the one we just heard, even during war, right? Like that kind of controlling idea that this couple can get back together, they can find one another, and be reunited no matter what. Even war can't stop them, and they look to hide and get away. So that controlling idea is powerful because it's then shown through the plot of this podcast. The story climax, really important. Something has to build, like again, that gunshot, soldiers storm the house. That's that climax where everything's building. We feel it could be something's going to go wrong. They're meeting and different times. We're not sure yet. And the climax can be a little bit surprising too, as it was in that one. And and that's the whole thing where everything really boils up and comes to a crescendo in this climax, and that's what we want to look at realizing in that. Script format. So let's talk a bit about what kind of the script format can be. So generally we have like interior, old farmhouse, day, so time of day, where it is, then some sort of stuff about the sound effect. So sound effects: wind howling, music, piano theme. We can list what kind of theme that is. Narrator: it was a dark and snow-filled night. Julie: I can't believe it's snowing again. So you can see there's narrators to characters, and uh, and how it can work, and how it can what's taking place in the whole concept of what's going on, right? So so that's a really interesting thing here. So in terms of scene heading, we go into the software keystrokes, some of the ideas here. So scene headings, you type interior, exterior, and it will then show up as an interior, exterior. Time of day, is all capitals. Hit return, you go to the next line. Add action, hit return, go to the next line, tab, and so on. So this is based on the Final Draft app. And so I have it here. This is available on an iPad. I think it's about $25 last time I checked. So it's pretty low cost, and it's great because you can just type, and in typing on the iPad, you can basically continue on. So if I'm right here, you can see that if I go to return, it takes me back to action. So I can say sound effects and bells ringing, right? And then from there, I can then go to a character, and I can say, it's back to the narrator, hit return. The clerk looks away. So we keep typing what the narrator's saying. So let's just have a look at this. So it was interior train station, afternoon, a distant train whistle, so we can hear that. Crowds talk in background. Again, another sound element. Violin music can be heard. So you can see how much I'm describing the sound elements. And this is how we can write our script. Narrator. A man plays a violin next to the ticket booth. So the narrator's filling in visually what we need to see. So that's the next part there, right? So you can see the structure. So we have our scene headings. We have descriptions of, in this case, what we're going to see. What we're going to hear, sorry, and instead of what we're going to see. And then we have our characters, so narrator, and then their dialogue. So what do they speak? And you can see how great this is, because then it keeps everything clean. We know the dialogue's in the middle. That's what we're recording with our actors or yourself as a cast member, and you know where to find that dialogue. So whether you use this Final Draft program, or you can do it in any kind of Word document, word processing program, you can write your script in that as well. But just practice this format, and it makes it really clean to find the dialogue, and it makes it really clean to identify all the characters, because you can quickly see that there's a narrator, you can quickly see there's a young girl, and the dialogue's just in that piece there, versus the descriptions are up here. So the formatting helps everyone, as you read it, to stay really organized. Young girl, I'd like one ticket to Toronto, please. Clerk, I'm sorry, little girl, do you have a parent with you? I can't sell you a ticket to board alone. Sound effects. Bells ringing. The clerk looks away. So the narrator explains what the clerk is doing, since we can't see the clerk looking away. We can't say, 1 second, if clerk, 1 second, I'm looking away. That wouldn't make sense. We need a narrator to help us do that. So you can see with the audio podcast script writing, there is usually a lot of necessity for the narrator to help us visualize what's going on, right? So that's kind of the idea of our script formatting, what it would look like. And then again, I just hit return, and it goes back to the scene heading here. So that's the scene, and now I can say interior. I go interior, right? And it's going to say, okay, what am I looking for? And I'm going to say interior train. And afternoon. So now I'm in a train. So I've changed from exterior or interior train station to interior train. And now I'm going to take the audience into the train, right? So instead of being in the train station, now I'm in the train. And maybe there's, someone's there. It's going to go back and forth. So maybe someone is there's a little girl on the train, and she sees the other little girl, and maybe they look the same, and it's kind of a science fiction thing, and we keep going from there. So from there, here I can say crowds talk on the train, right? And now I'm going to hit return. I'm going to go to this character thing here. I'm going to say another young girl. I can't wait to see the art gallery exhibit. Okay. And then I'm going to go here, narrator. The young girl on the sits on a train. She looks identical to the young girl at the ticket booth. So you can see it, and then I hit return, and I go back to the scene there. I can go interior, exterior, or I can do more description and keep going from there. So this is how it works out really nicely, and then it's ready to go as a script. We can export this as a PDF, so I can just hit that top button right there. So that's just that button right up here I hit. Let's do that again. So see right there, and then I can email the script, but if I do a PDF, then it lets me save a PDF that can be shared really easily with anybody. The great thing is that if you email the script, anybody can read it. If they just have Final Draft without buying it, they can go into reading mode. Final Draft makes sure that you can keep reading. So it's a really, really great program. So, check it out. Otherwise, practice the same format in any kind of a Word document, word processing document. You can use like a Google Word doc or a Microsoft Word or Notepad, anywhere that you can type, you can do the same kind of formatting. So I just wanted to show you that sample of what kind of formatting is involved. Here's some of the quick keys. Now it doesn't all relate necessarily directly to the iPad. This is kind of a special, slightly different app. But the Final Draft software on the desktop version definitely works in this manner. So if you type I or E, you get interior, exterior, hit return key, you go to the action, hit tab, it goes to the character, hit tab to go to the expression box, and then hit return to go to the dialog box. Command S is save, Command Z undo, delete, and so on. And then there's the elements you can toggle on top, just like you can in the iPad. So, you can rewatch this and see these kind of quick commands if you want to use Final Draft. Again, I recommend it if you're going to be doing some writing. It's a great software tool, especially for the iPad, really low cost as a app to buy. And you'll really enjoy it and love it as a screenwriting software that can be used for your podcast. So here's some samples, and you can, I'm not going to open these up and watch. I wanted to show that other sample previously, but here's some samples that have some great narrative type audio podcasts in terms of what's been done out there. So check these out if you have some time. We looked at some of these in the prior workshop, but I think definitely there's tons out there. Again, very similar to the radio play concept. I think there's a real neat ability to use that and transport people to different environments. And then, like I said before, use these tools to further any kind of podcast you want to do. So pre-production to production process. So this is kind of the next thing we want to do, is how do we get from pre-production to production. And the first thing really, you need to discover or inspire an idea for your audio podcast. Like figure out something that's really you want to share, something that can be fun as a short, something that maybe is moving, something that you want to just get off of your chest and share with people, or just keep, even if you make it and you just have it for yourself. Maybe it's something you need to get off, get out there or express. Maybe it's something, a funny joke that you've been wanting to kind of create into a short story. So anything's possible. And again, that's the whole thing. So write a 2 to 3 page script with a beginning, middle, and end. That'll be enough to do like a couple minutes of recording. Cast your podcast. Who will voice the part or parts? So maybe it's just yourself. Maybe there's one more person. And then next, create a list of all the sound effects. So this would be what you would have, written in your script, as I had in the script there, like violin, crowd sounds, bell, train station, right? We got to create those things. Not everything will be listed. So sometimes we need to create the essence of a train station. And that's the fun part we'll get to in a couple weeks, where we get into that creating the soundscape and the sound design for the audio podcast, like what's necessary to make it work. So we create a list of sound effects and music that you will require and decide what can be recorded and what needs to be sourced. So you might decide that you can record some of your own music, or you're going to just get some stock music. Plenty of great stock pieces out there, sources, and same with sound effects. Or you might want to just use a portable sound recorder and record it as well. Decide if you require remote audio recording. So that means, can it be done by each person using their own device? So they can maybe use their own iPhone or smartphone and just use like a voice memo recording to do their lines. Or will you access the portable sound recording kit from a library? Then if you are getting equipment, first make sure you schedule in an audio recording session with you and your cast, either in person or remotely, depending on what's safe to do and what works best. Consider doing a rehearsal prior to recording, and that allows the cast to practice and improve their reading of the part. If you're doing this yourself, do a run through first. Don't just sit down and record right away. Like, practice a few times, get the flow of it, because chances are the first reading isn't going to be perfect, but you can get an idea, try a bit and then start recording. But it's always nice to kind of do a no pressure rehearsal, even if it's just yourself, so that you're not recording. Because the minute, I tell you, the minute you hit record, all of a sudden you can get nervous, you can get a bit anxious, like, oh, now we're recording, and how do we keep it calm and not have that nervousness potentially in your voice too. So consider doing that rehearsal, and then book and take out any equipment you require. So that can go from the library, or maybe from somebody you're borrowing a microphone from them. So get all of that. Then record your vocal parts. So that's the whole thing. So you're basically getting from inspiration to that first recording, getting the vocals recorded. That's what you want to get to. And next week we're going to get into how to record. So this is just kind of that process of what's needed. So really the first thing we need to do right now is figure out what idea you'd like to do, write the script, and start thinking about that cast and sound effects and things you'll need. You can do about half of this first initial stage, and then you can get into the recording. But we're going to get into more of the recording process in next week's session. So definitely, if you haven't signed up for the next 3 weeks, you can do that through Eventbrite, or you can access this week's link to find the other weeks 2, 3, and 4 on there as well. So it's all there, and then it's all archived, and you can rewatch these. So it's really great. Creator Space Portable Sound Recording Kit. So as I mentioned before, if you're a member of the Blue Mountains Public Library or Wasaga Beach Public Library, you can access the Portable Sound Recording Kit. So it's a standalone kit that consists of the Zoom H4n, which is a multi-track recorder, and it's combined with the Audio-Technica condenser mic. You can record narrations, interviews, even do some demo music recording of a couple tracks. It comes with everything you need. That condenser microphone's fantastic. It's a really great microphone. If you do the online proficiency test that you require to take this out, you'll learn about how to hook it all up as well. But we are going to go over that next week, including how do we record on just tablets, how to record on desktops, and different options for free software, which we'll talk about now as well. So sound recording tips. So one big thing, you have to always record everything at specific levels, ensure you have a rich and full sound, and you don't want to clip anything. Because anything overloaded, you can't fix that. If it's distorted and overloaded, you can't, make things better if it's distorted and overloaded. And, in digital sound that's not very loud, you can always boost it and fix it. There might be some noise, but you can boost it. It's easier than something that is called clipped. So once it's too loud and clipped, it's really hard to fix, and that's really important. Here's some sound levels, and we'll get into this more, but just start to think about it. What kind of decibel ranges and things. So 0 decibels in digital is basically 100%. So if anyone's from using analog recording in the past, 0 used to be where your average is. So 0 now is actually the 100%. So you never want to hit 0. So you're usually going to about minus 10 in the digital, which is about minus 10, minus 15 is about 0 decibels of the previous analog. And then I say about between minus 6 maximum to minus 20 minimum. And that's kind of that range of vocal range of latitude in the mixing. I think it's a little bit cut off here with the logo, but it's about minus 6 to minus 20 is the idea there. And yeah, so then what kind of software can we use, or what kind of access can we get? So the portable sound recorder is great. You can use a smartphone or tablet. You can use your laptop. You can use your desktop. And the software that I'll be demoing, and there's probably 1,000 more out there, but GarageBand app that you can have on your iPad or iPhone. Pro Tools first. So Pro Tools is a great industry standard sound digital audio workstation software for music and mixing and sound design and recording. And their Pro Tools first is totally free. You just have to register an Avid account, and then it's a free piece of software. So we'll be looking at Pro Tools as well. And any kind of voice memo apps. I just call them memo apps. If anything that you can record vocals on, voice memo, and there's a bunch of like voiceover recording, and so we'll look at a few things like that you can. A lot of portable devices work really well. I saw a question come in here, and what happens if you record in different spaces and with different microphones, and how do you make them sound about the same? So great question. So one of the things really important in recording is, even with different microphones, what we can do then is in the mixing, we can do some equalization to try to make the vocals sound about the same. So if one microphone perhaps brings in more bass, we can try to add bass to the microphone that brings in less bass. And that can kind of work itself out. Now what you want to do is record in as quiet of a room as possible. If it's not possible to be in a really quiet room, you can always try to put a blanket over a person, or you can go into like a closet and put a blanket or towel over your head and then record the lines into like a phone, and that can give you pretty clean recording without a microphone. But otherwise the microphones can be matched with equalization a bit. So it's kind of like shooting video with a couple cameras or photos with different cameras. You can do that kind of colorizing with correction in audio. So you can do the same thing with some of the frequencies. So that's the main thing. Otherwise, if there's one microphone and if a few people are doing recordings, I'm not sure if it's possible. You can always send it or get the other person to pick it up from you, and they can record it individually. And there's some really interesting solutions we'll look at for like inputs. There's some new microphones that you can plug in to smartphones as well. So we'll look at some technology that's out there, and especially we'll look at what we can do within our programming here as well. So that's kind of that sound side there. Now, in terms of what kind of equipment's available. So I'm just going to go right here. So this is our website, tbmcs.ca, and you just scroll down here and you go over here to the online proficiency test, and it will take you right to this. So you put in your name and info. You have to be a member of the Blue Mountains Public Library, Saga Beach Public Library, and then there's a whole thing, how to use the portable sound kit, and it tells you all about it in the video. And if you watch that, you can answer all of these questions. And we have a bunch of additional videos here that you can watch too. So these are available on our YouTube channel, but if you take the proficiency test, you can learn a lot about sound recording as well. So I welcome anyone to have a look at that and then access the equipment and the sound recorder. So yeah, that's a really fantastic thing. So for next week, just to recap, so the main thing we want to again create is, what is our goal here? So our goal is to write, record, and complete a final mix of a short 1 to 2 minute story-based fictional audio podcast. So for next week, I want everyone to sit down and come up with an idea, write that 1 to 2 page or 2 to 3 page maximum type of script that has your sound effects, has some characters, and your dialogue separated so that you're ready to then record. We've gone over a little bit about the recording, but we're going to do the hands-on demoing. I just wanted to introduce some of these ideas and start thinking about these kind of levels. And if you want to even get a jump on trying a few things out, you can always try some stuff out and see kind of what difficulties you might be having in recording. But we're going to have a whole big recording lesson next week, so I hope you can join us for then as well. So again, you can rewatch these. They're all available through the same link right when we finish. And check out some of those extra podcasts as well. And and I want to really thank everyone for joining us. Please come back next week. We're going to get right into recording. I'm going to have microphones, different devices to look at, software, and using available technology like iPhones, iPads, and a laptop as well. So thanks again for joining us. My name's Tom Sternad. You can email me, tom@tbmcs.ca, if you have any questions, or if you want to send me your script as you've written it and want any kind of feedback on if this will work as an audio podcast. I'd be happy to give you some input on that as well. So I look forward to having this interaction over the next few weeks as we have this journey to making our audio podcasts. So again, thanks to all our partners on this project, Canada Council for the Arts, and our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.